This demonstration will focus on Pareto charts. The purpose of this is to see if the 80-20 principle or the Pareto principle is alive inside of our data. We'll use the file called patient data and we'll focus on the complaints. Number one, we want to see if the Pareto principle does indeed apply. And secondly, if the Pareto principle does apply, is that consistent across each of our offices? Let's open our file and begin. We're going to focus on column N, which is major complaint. This is the biggest complaint that our patients have with our practice. The Pareto chart will allow us to see if the 80-20 principle applies. If the principle does apply, we expect the counts of one or several of these complaint types to be head and shoulders above all the other bars. So let's create one and see. Go to Graphical Tools and go to Basic Pareto Chart. We'll use the entire table next. We'll scroll down and select Major Complaint as the Pareto category. Rather than hit Finish, hit Next. Here we see a Pareto chart that is not properly proportioned. The correct proportion is that the axis on the left should be the sum height of all the boxes stacked on top of each other. It is not. We can easily change that. Where it says cumulative sum line, we're going to check on top of first bar. Now we have a properly proportioned Pareto chart. Under Chart Options, we'll select this tab. In Windows 7, you cannot vary the color of the bars, but you can alter the gap width. You can make the bars fatter or narrower if you want. For the X-axis font, you can make it horizontal, you can make it slanted, or you can make it vertical. I prefer mine slanted. You'll notice there are no numbers above the bars or the cumulative sum line. To get those numbers, we select Bars if you want numbers for the bars, Cum Sum Line if you want numbers on that line, and alternatively you could have a data table at the bottom. I'm going to turn that off, but I will leave those numbers on. And then for the secondary axis, remember this axis on the right goes with the cumulative sum line, and you can either show that in decimals or as percents. Just as a reminder, the axis on the left goes with the bars, and this is a count of how many complaints that you have in each category. We'll hit Finish. When this comes up, you are okay in saying yes. This will lock your defaults in so that every time you create a Pareto chart, it will automatically look like this. Because I have to instruct people in how to use this, I never say yes to this so that I can show them this feature. So you can click yes, I'm going to click no. When we hit Finish, here is your graph. The first thing we notice is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories of complaints. And does the Pareto principle apply? Patients being kept waiting, 60 out of the 100 complaints that we have are that the patients are kept waiting. That bar is head and shoulders above all the others. So yes, the Pareto principle does apply. One or more of these complaints is accounting for the bulk of all of the complaints we've received. If you look at the cumulative sum line, what it's telling you is if you worked on patients being kept waiting and being able to make fast appointments, that would handle 79% of all the complaints that have come in. But in terms of directing you as to where the big root cause is or what you should be looking for to work on, it's telling you that hands down, patients being kept waiting is the biggest complaint. So we can answer that first question very clearly. Does the Pareto principle apply? Absolutely it does. The next question is this pattern similar across all offices? We can't answer that from this graph, so we're going back to patient data. You can hit F4 or you can just click on patient data. We need advanced Pareto features for this, so please go to Sigma Excel, Graphical Tools, Advanced Pareto Charts. We'll use the entire table next. And in this case, we will select Major Complaint as X1. We'll select Office as X2. This lets you do multi-level Pareto charts, and it lets you do up to 4 levels in this. So if you wanted to see if major complaint varied by day of week, you could put day of week in as X2. If you wanted to see if it varies by office and by day of week, you could put day of week in as X3. You could play with this for hours. If you want to know, does it vary by gender, by type of patient, by day of week, you could slice and dice the data until the cows come home. For right now, we'll limit it to this. We hit OK. And I'll increase the size just a little for us. Does the Pareto principle apply? For the Main Street office, the number one problem is being kept waiting. Obviously, that bar is head and shoulders above the others. Yes, it applies. For the Mall Park office, the number one complaint, being kept waiting. For the South Avenue office, the number one complaint is also being kept waiting. The only difference that I'm seeing in here is the number two complaint, because we're focusing on the biggest drivers of complaints, so the number one and number two complaints. The number two complaint for both South Avenue and Main Street is not being able to make fast appointments. That differs a little at Mall Park, where they are being rushed during their visit. So the bottom line is that the Pareto principle does indeed apply. It applies at each office, and hands down the number one complaint, regardless of which office you look at, is patients being kept waiting. And you can use that to drive your investigation and drive your actions. That is your new friend, the Pareto chart.